Yeah, excellent.
Live session. Okay. So I'm sorry. I think that like live doesn't work with us because I hear my voice and sorry.
So it tells me that it is
Okay.
recording and that it's
So
live on YouTube at the same time.
yeah, I stopped the live session. We will just record.
Okay.
I will learn it later. So before we start, I would like to introduce you to our listeners on YouTube. Professor 𝐬𝐭𝐮𝐝 has been a research staff member at Oak Ridge National Laboratory since October 2004 and a corporate fellow since 2020. Some years later, he became joint faculty member at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Graduate Education, University of Tennessee. Approximately 1 year, he worked at Amazon as special projects principal scientist, and after his assignment at Amazon, he resumed his role at University of Tennessee, Knoxville as a Weston Fulton Chair Professor in the Department of Material Science and Engineering. Professor 𝐬𝐭𝐮𝐝 is the recipient of several well-known awards, and he is also a member of editorial boards for the Nanotechnology, Journal of Applied Physics, Physics Letters, and Nature Partner, Journal Computational Materials. Once again, welcome to our today's talk, Professor 𝐬𝐭𝐮𝐝. We are glad to see you here. And before we start our talk, if you have some words, you are welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Gulnara. So I think what you are doing is an exceptionally important thing because we all know that most of us are looking for positions in the industry, and the transition from the academic environment into the industry setting can be complicated. So career planning is definitely difficult. The choices that we make often stay with us for a long, long time. So if I can share my experience of sort of looking into the life in industry and can share this experience with the listeners of your webinar, I'm delighted to do so.
Yes, we would be glad to hear your experience, and let's start then. So, as we know, PhD students, especially in the final year of their study, are expected to make this decision, whether they should stay in academia or they should make transition to the industry. I would like to start this question. What are the benefits staying or being in academia? And also, what are the disadvantages of that? From the student side, I can say that, for example, flexible working hours or to implement our ideas in academia is much more realistic than industry. However, I would like to hear it from your side, please.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that once you're in the last year as the graduate student, that may be already a little bit too late. So to start to think whether to stay in academia or to move in industry. So I would actually start thinking about it starting from your second year as the graduate student, for one very simple reason, that any kind of career planning takes preparation. So it is a good idea to know what you are in for. It is a very good idea to know how to prepare for it. And some of the things have time to develop. For example, social network or the mentorship network is not something that can be made in the last year. Another important consideration is that as the last year as a graduate student, realistically, you would be expected to spend most of your time finishing the PhD thesis. So that's the time when you actually want to have the plans for the future already made. So the second important consideration is I mean, there are a lot of the one important thing to bring up is that while in academia, you will have some idea about what is the academic life from the perspective of the graduate student and to some extent the postdoctoral scientist. From the perspective of the faculty, it would be actually probably different. So for me, it was a surprise when I found out that most of the time as a faculty, you're expected to spend developing the funding portfolio, participating in the service to the professional organizations and the university, teaching. Science is actually the reason why we are doing it, but that's a relatively small part of what the faculty does. So management and building programs and service usually tends to take most amount of the time. Equally important is that, at least in my case, or in case of a lot of my colleagues, while we were in academia, purely in academia, what happened at the industry is actually very difficult to imagine. So in my experience, being in Amazon, the work-life balance in the industry is usually maintained much better than in academic environment. Everything related to the interesting work, the projects that I worked with in industry were exceptionally interesting. And so this was also the case for many other scientists that work for Amazon. And they work for Amazon in multiple capacities, starting from the entry-level positions as the scientist somewhere in the lab 126, meaning the electronics lab, or sustainability effort, all the way to the people who have joint appointments between academia and quantum or machine learning programs at Amazon. So jobs, I mean, industry is different. There is much larger variability in the roles and job definitions in industry than there is in academia. But the jobs in the industry can be super interesting. The primary difference between the academia and industry, in my opinion, is in some sense, what is your end product? So in academia, what we expected to deliver and what is ultimately measured by the scientific agencies is typically a publication. So they are used as the proxies for the science accomplished. It's not a bad proxy. It's also not a super good proxy. Or if you want, in the industrial term, that would be KPI. So in industry, generally, the focus would be on some customer-related problems. So in Amazon, it would be development of the service or a product. In other companies, it can be development of the enabling framework, especially if you are in the machine learning area. But many industries allow you to publish. They will consider the publication as something that is high visibility. So look at the papers coming out of the Google DeepMind. These are fantastic publications. But ultimately, what matters is what you accomplish. The code, the product, the service. Papers are okay, but that's not the primary indicator. So the difference is in the reward function, not so much in the style of work.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. It was very insightful explanation. The following this question, I would like to ask you that you have been in Amazon and also currently at university. Could you please tell about your experience? What was the different working in company than being in academia, beside the examples that you have mentioned already?
I mean, so for my stay in Amazon, I was specifically in the part of Amazon where publication was simply not an option. So I worked in the part which is their moonshot factory division, meaning that to some extent I can describe what the work was like, but not what the work was. That being said, I had quite a lot of opportunities and used those opportunities to connect with the people across the multiple parts of Amazon and understand what they're doing. And there can be a lot of things that are very reminiscent of that on the academia. So there are divisions that work on the development of codes and development of the some hardware products, either electronics or even more programs which are even more close to the chemistry, physics, and biology. That would be very similar to the type of experiences that one will have in academia. Interestingly enough, even at certain level of seniority, even the proposal writing becomes a part of your daily work as an Amazonian. So Amazon has this interesting system that if you want to propose a program, you essentially have to write a proposal that goes up several levels of management, and then you're expected to defend it in front of the typically your boss's boss, kind of at least several levels. And if it is approved and if it makes sense, then you get an opportunity to realize it. Interestingly enough, the life in Amazon is controlled by the what is called the Jeff Bezos leadership principles. So one of those principles is disagree and commit, meaning that if you present your idea, you're expected to be reasonably aggressive in defending this idea. So it's a kind of great practice going forward. The interesting thing in Amazon, which is totally different from academia or any other environment that I know of, is a almost complete lack of the PowerPoint presentation. So
Wow.
several years ago, Jeff Bezos made a point that when people give the PowerPoint presentation, the attention of the audience is usually on the presenter and not necessarily on the ideas. And also they are not traceable. So Jeff introduced the system where each meeting starts with the people reading the document, and making comments and then discussing it. So the only time in Amazon when I saw a PowerPoint presentation was during the interaction with the people from either HR or the legal department. So they use it. The scientists and engineers in Amazon operate on the principle of the written documents. So it's a small fact, but actually a very interesting one.
Yes, actually, I didn't know it, so it's something new and it's interesting. Okay, then let's go to our next question. Let's assume the PhD decided to continue his or her journey in the industry. However, challenges may start from here as well. I would like to ask, what are the primary reasons that majority of PhD students struggle to find positions in the industry? And what actions can both academia and industry take to solve this problem?
Fantastic question. So first of all, let's start from the very beginning, that the number of the PhDs graduating every year significantly exceeds the number of the academic positions. So for most people, simply the numbers dictate that you will end up being in industry in the first place. So second part for it, which is very important, is that finding the roles is actually a process. So no matter your level of seniority, finding positions takes time. So I have colleagues who are very visible on the LinkedIn and generally don't have a particularly dearth of the job opportunities, but even they share the experience, they can be reached out by the recruiters. Typically, recruiters reach out to you for the job which is equivalent or slightly below the one that you have now. Very rarely you would be approached for the position that allows you to develop further and move up in the move up. So finding positions, especially the positions that allow your professional growth, is always a challenge, no matter whether you are fresh out of PhD or you already have been in the industry for 10 or 20 years. So take the struggle for granted. It's always going to be the case. Same thing applies to academia. I mean, the entry level into the assistant professor position typically comes with the competitions of between 100 and several hundred candidates for a single job. So chances are small everywhere. That's kind of natural. So the first most important thing is to expect that. And the part of the expectations is to start to make the connections and form your ideas where you may move in the future early on. So it doesn't come as a surprise. I'm going to be graduated in a month. What I'm going to do after that. It's much better to have this type of opportunities laid down in advance. So secondly, there are two important factors about why finding position in industry can be difficult. So the first one is it is very important to during the interviews it's very important to be able to explain what is that you can bring to the table. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, industry is usually not particularly interested in the number of publications or even research awards you can bring to the table. What industry is interested in is what can you do as the member of the team? How easy are you to work with? What is the value that you can add to the process? And it is far more important to tell the prospective reviewer or interviewer or recruiter what is that you're good at, what are the real successes behind your belt. So rather than saying that, hey, I wrote the paper in this high-profile journal, it's far more important to say that I built the code base that allow to do this, and by now so many people are using them. If you go on and say that, you know what, I have also collected the feedback from some of my group members or colleagues in the same department, and based on their feedback, I have improved my code base that allowed it to be more efficient or more user-friendly, and then even more people started to use that, that's absolutely fantastic. That actually means that you care about what you're doing, you care about how people use what you have developed and proposed, and you pay attention to the feedback. That's already a great start. Obviously, my experience is more connected to the engineering and basic science type of projects. But the same stories will apply if you're working if you're getting your degrees in the field like language, psychology, or something like this, because in this case, you can direct mapping onto the industry UX roles and user experience roles and so on and so forth. So talk about what you've done and why other people should care, what you brought to the table. That will resonate with the interviewers much stronger.
Okay, got it. And from this answer, I have the one question that in academia, for example, the PhD students, myself as well, we focus on a very a narrow topic. For example, I am in the field of electrochemistry. However, what I'm doing is like a small, really small branch of or a small area of the electrochemistry. And for example, when I check the job description, what I see that they mostly looking for the experienced people in different types of microscopes, which I don't have any experience about that. And in this case, okay, we can say that still I'm second year student, and I have time to learn this type of skills. However, learning the skills beside your work is not that much easy or straightforward always. For example, if I go to the let's say the department of XPS, the people who do the XPS, like X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, and I'm asking them, I want to learn this microscope, how it works, methods. I don't think that they will be happy with this idea, because for them I am unexperienced user, and any kind of misuse of the device can damage that device, which can cost them a lot. So from this point, it's really difficult to get a different experience than what you do for your research.
So
what's your opinion about this?
Very good, very good summary. And you are right that there are different places and the different opportunities to grow. You are absolutely correct about it. And in some sense, the question of having positive dynamics with the facilities that are available to you now, at least theoretically available now, and building the skill base for industry, it's actually closely related question. So let's look at it this way. So for me, it's kind of easier to project the experience in this case, because for 15 years, I worked in the user facility. And when you work in the user facility, part of your everyday job is actually working with the users, no matter where on the seniority chain you will be. So I can be a corporate fellow and the group leader. Still, I spend a fraction of my time working with the users when it is something that I can contribute. just because this is a part of my portfolio. Admittedly, it's smaller at the senior level than it was at the junior level, but that goes without saying. So look at it from the following perspective. So there are scenarios when there is a specific tool which is very expensive and very to fix, very difficult to use, and there would be people whose job is actually to ensure that this tool works and the people who work with them have the positive user experience. In this case, you are right that for them, if you come to learn and basically after that you want to leave, the motivation to provide the training can be relatively low. So they will do that if they have to, if it is the part of their job description. But kind of sometimes people can do things, but their heart is not really into it. At the same time, if you come early on and say that, look, I'm interested in the program of developing specific classes of batteries, the XPS is the technique that, to the best of my knowledge and what I found in literature, is absolutely uniquely suited to solving these problems. I believe that I have several years in front of me. What book can I read and to help me understand what the XPS data can give to me? So even the 2 weeks you make an argument that I read this book, can I do these measurements? You know, you do it for several months. If you ask to join the process, typically it becomes possible. So nobody wants to, as you pointed, create the situation when there is a potential for things going wrong. However, everybody professional that I know typically wants to share their knowledge and participate in some interesting project. And that obviously means training people. So for industry roles, the situation is actually almost perfect for the typical behavior interview, because generally having skills is hands-on skills is very important. So in industry, that's why you get your job. That would be checked during the functional part of your interview, in addition to the behavioral part. That being said, it is understood that skill sets has to constantly grow. In some sense, your recruiter and your hiring manager would, of course, be interested in your skills. That's important, because what are going in the day one in the lab, if you apply for experimental position. But it's far, far more important, how do you approach of the first project of constant upskilling and constant learning? So all the people that I know, one thing that I notice about industry, and again, my industry experience is limited to multiple parts of Amazon, where I have friends and with whom I interacted with, and the stories that I heard about the places where they've been working before. So in industry, people move very often. So if I kind of hang out with the folks who used to work for 𝐬𝐭𝐮𝐝 or Apple or Google or YouTube, I kind of hear stories about what the life was in those places. So in industry, upskilling is simply the principle of life. You always have to grow in terms of skills, in terms of management training, in terms of understanding business. Without it, you become irrelevant very, very rapidly. So it is far more important for your hiring manager to hear the story about how you got interested in some technique, what have you done in order to get the skill set on that, and how the skill set allowed you to solve the specific problem that you had. And if you have several stories like that, and then you will be successful. Comparatively, telling them that I studied the behavior of certain material in the UHV by XPS and I wrote a great paper about it, actually that would be considerably less interesting.
Okay. And the next question will be that, let's say that, okay, you graduate from the academia and you start to apply the industry roles. So in interview process, you get to know that actually your skills are not satisfying for that role. I would like to ask that how industry like employers are negotiable about this. Do they allow you to improve your skills in their company, or you're just get rejected?
So this is the case where I probably don't know the answer, because even though I got some amount of the, I've been a kind of learned a little bit about the interview process when I was in Amazon. In order to answer this question, I literally have to be on hundreds of the interview loops, which I've never been. So I would not know the answer exactly. Practically, I would say that it is a much better idea to apply for the industry roles that are aligned with your expertise. However, the key thing here is to define the expertise properly. So the expertise and skill is not working on specific type of instrument. So for example, if the industry role asks for the experience working on the atomic force microscope or electrochemistry, I seriously doubt that it would be associated with the knowledge of specific system. It usually would be broader than that, and there would be an assumption that you need to get trained on the new tool anyway. There can be an exception, for example, if the role asks for the experience working on the electron microscopy and your experience as a scanning probe, that's probably not a good match. But within the different manufacturers of the electron microscopy tools, if you understand what you're doing, the hands-on part is probably something that can come in easily. Beyond that part, as I said, the important thing is how fast do you learn? What is your motivation? Are you a team player? What do you think is success and in working in a group? These things are kind of have to be balanced with the skills.
Right. And also, do you think that academia can also take some steps in this direction, that they can send the PhD students for internship in industry if they want? And so that can be useful for them to have the network as well as to learn the skill to get to know what's going on in this industry rather than working in the lab in academia.
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is that as the faculty member at UT, one of my primary mentorship goals, both for the students in my group and students generally in the department in Oxford, is actually help them build the connection to industry and appreciation of what the industry roles require. So how exactly to do it? I mean, there are multiple things. So in most cases, the experience transfer is something that is done as one-on-ones or discussion with a small group. So interestingly, giving the webinars or giving lectures is an important step, but by far not sufficient. But you need to basically tell people that, look, if you want to do something interesting, there is a very large probability that industry would be a right place for doing that. So it is worth pursuing academic pathway if and only if you clearly understand that doing open science and kind of going in some sense for scientific fame is something that you want to accomplish. For a lot of other things, if you want to do things practical, industry may be a better fit. Another thing that is important to understand is that academia is usually fairly ruthless when it comes to the amount of effort that you expected to put into that. So industry, at least in my experience, had a considerably better work-life balance. It depends on the area, but for equivalent roles in industry, the remuneration typically would be also considerably higher than in the academia. So it is your call, and it may be that your heart tells you that you should be in academia. That's entirely possible. However, it is better to make decisions when they are informed decisions, rather than making decisions just because the academia is the only thing that you've encountered before.
That's right. Okay, I forgot my next question because you're talking like very insightful and I'm listening very carefully. I forgot my question. Okay, from my notes, the last question actually here, that Based on your experience, which specific industries have you observed that PhD students frequently transition into, and what do you think are some reasons contributing to this trend?
So this is a complicated question because you see, you can parse the industry based on the type of roles that you have. You can parse it based on the companies and the company culture. You can parse it based on the size of the industries. So industry is generally a very multidimensional area. The skill sets that you need to, for example, start your own startup or to join the large corporation and kind of work your way up in the corporate world, these skill sets are actually fairly different. The part that also matters strongly in this case is the environment. So there is a reason why building the startup in the Silicon Valley or Seattle or Boston can be considerably easier than elsewhere, because there is a whole startup culture, including the incubators and mentorship networks, and importantly, the VC system that basically provides you with the ways to build it up and either succeed or move on to next iteration. So comparatively to that, so this type of opportunities are not distributed uniformly across the country. So this is just a fact of life. At the same time, this is something that one can consider as a part of the career planning. So secondly, as I mentioned, industry roles are very different even within the single corporation. So you can choose, for example, you can enter as the junior scientist. So as a junior scientist, you will have, or engineer, you will have maybe, say, 5 to 10 years ahead of you when you can grow, if you want, as the individual contributor, meaning that you develop new skills, you become responsible for more considerable part of the company product portfolio, but generally you're an individual contributor. You may decide before then that you are interested in the translation with the management track. So rather than working by yourself, you feel that you can create extra value for the company by coordinating the group of people. So then the way you approach it is that you talk to your manager, you explore what are the opportunities for mentorship and training that you have within the company. You always keep in mind that sometimes you have to move sideways to move up, either in the different business unit or in different company. So I have not seen that many people who had a straight up career growth. It typically was always moves. And these moves sometimes involve being an individual contributor, being a manager, going back to being the individual contributor on a higher level, being a manager of the smaller group of people. So it's not like you just grow in terms of your management responsibilities. Somewhere 10 years inside being in the industry, at least in the software engineering, you need to ask yourself a question, what are you doing next? So some areas when you program, it's generally a young person's job, simply by the amount of time you can invest and so on and so forth. You also can bring more value to the organization if you share your experience and knowledge with a larger group of people. There are two ways you can do that. So you can either take the management track. Management track itself can be very diversified. So you can be a director, meaning leading large group of people, or you can be a product manager, meaning that you're responsible for specific product and you interact with the multiple business units to make sure that it happens. Or another option, you can go into the pathway of the principal engineer, meaning that you theoretically remain the individual contributor, but practically you kind of work as the roving advisor, solving the problems on the level of the business unit or the whole organization. And the thing is that many of these career pathways are not obvious from the outside. They can be different in the different companies. So for example, in Amazon, you can be a vice president and individual contributor. Many companies, realistically, the only way up past certain points is the management track. And this is all something that you need to find out. And what makes it interesting is that you need to know that about the company you are in. And obviously you need to know about about the company that you're considering the roles in. So both where you are and in the alternatives. The good thing is that once you're already in this world, you actually learn these things as a part of the social interaction, talking to people, collecting information, and so on. If you are on the early stages of career, so if you are a graduate student, then the ways to learn this information is social network. So LinkedIn is great for that. There are a lot of people who discuss the industry transitions in general.
Right.
Another great place is using the social network to build the mentorship. So there are a lot of people who are already senior and retired from industry, but are active and happy to share their knowledge. And you never know, you will learn something, and sometimes maybe these people will be a gate for the transition to industry. So personal knowledge is really important.
Yeah, right. And I think that we are already at the end of our session. I would like to say thank you to you, because this session, I'm sure that will be important for the students to make their decision, or maybe to revise their decision. So I hope that our listeners later on YouTube, they will also enjoy this session as much as I did. So if you have anything to say.
No, I think that that was great. And if you and your listeners have any questions, I would be delighted to address them. So as I mentioned, mentorship is one of the greatest way to get somewhere. So obviously that's a commitment from both sides, but if there is a alignment between the advice that I can give and the professional interest, I would be delighted to help.
Thank you so much. So it's end of our session, and I would like to say to listeners that our series will continue, and I will announce the topic of next week on next week, so Wednesday, and it will be also the interesting one. We will have a special guest there as well. So guys, stay tuned, and thank you so much, Sergey, to be here today with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.